Welcome to our section on bias and diversity. I'm going to begin with a short video from a television show you may be familiar with entitled, What Would You Do?
You see this and you wonder, did he lose his keys or is he blatantly stealing that bike? In broad daylight, he hammers and then saws on the chain. When that doesn't work, he pulls out an industrial-sized bolt cutter. And when he's asked, he fesses up.
You lost the lock?
No, not exactly.
But he's not a real thief. Justin Kelly is an actor, and our hidden cameras are rolling.
What happened? Nothing. I can't get through the lock. I mean, I know this is weird, but you wouldn't happen to know whose bike this is, would you? No. All right, good. Thank you.
It was odd that somebody had all that equipment.
But you didn't do anything.
No.
That's true.
That's the bottom line.
Lots of people stop and stare. A few even question the actor.
I guess I have to ask, is that your bike?
I guess technically no.
Okay.
Okay. Bye.
Good luck.
In over an hour, about 100 people pass by. Only George and Arlene try to stop him. Some tell us they plan to call the police later. Others say they're scared. Keep moving. This woman and her friends give our thief the benefit of the doubt. When we ask why, Bisa Washington tells us first impressions matter.
I remember thinking young white men don't usually carry burglar tools.
So we all make assumptions, huh?
Yeah.
I'm thinking maybe he works for the park.
We replace our white thief with this young man, Matlock. Remember, both actors dress in a similar way and are about the same age.
Is that your bike?
Nah.
Then what are you cutting the chain for?
Right away.
Right away,
somebody yelled. Wow. Within seconds, another person confronts our thief.
Is that your bike?
Technically it's not, but it's gonna be mine.
More people converge.
Is that on the cell phone? You call the police. He's like stealing somebody's bike.
Are you taking that bike? That's your bike?
No, it's not, sir.
Oh, why are you doing that?
Is this any of y'all bikes? Is this your bike?
It's not, it belongs
No,
to
but whoever's it
It
is.
belongs to someone.
To who?
Well, not to you.
And sure enough, one man whips out a cell phone to call 911.
Yeah, there's someone taking a bike here.
Our actor triggers more reaction. Some people are even snapping pictures for evidence.
I got you, bud. I got you.
Guy's stealing the bike. Whose bike's over here?
Once everyone moves away, we reset our cameras, and within minutes, another outraged man is yelling.
Are you trying to steal that bike?
Excuse me, sir, but the bike's been here for days. Like, no one's gonna take it.
Well, that's not your bike then.
Yeah,
You can't just come in and take something from somebody.
excuse me, sir. I'm
Okay, I'll just take your tools away then. This yours, sir?
Please, sir, don't touch my stuff, sir. Please, sir, do not touch my
Well,
stuff.
you're touching
please.
somebody else's stuff.
Yeah, all right, but this has been here. Like, who's gonna take it?
Well, that doesn't make it your property.
Technically, it does.
No,
If
it
it's-
doesn't
if
technically. It's not yours to take.
All right, sir.
When we bring out our cameras, David Robb wants us to go after the thief.
That kid in the red shirt.
He's hacking away at a bike
has been
that's not
here for
his.
days, and he has a right to take it and steal it. And he's come here with...
She may not look like your average bike thief, but actress Ashley Carpenter makes sure anyone who asks knows she's up to no good.
Need a hand?
You don't know whose this is, do you?
Whose bike it is?
Yeah.
With a little help from Ed Fitzsimmons, the bike chain easily falls away.
Yup, everywhere. Oh my goodness, what a strong man you are.
And he isn't the only man who stops in his tracks. What's this guy thinking?
You know, you pull up, you don't know if she lost her key, if she's trying to actually take the bike, but then again, she's a girl. And would you ever see a girl doing that?
Steal?
You never know. Most of the times, it's a guy gonna do something like that.
Reginald pedals right past his appalled wife, straight to our actress, asking her if she needs a hand.
Okay, I'll eventually get it.
I did some time in Rollway. I can steal this.
Oh, you can steal it? Maybe you can help me steal it.
So does that make you think anything about biases? Well, let's talk about bias. What is a bias? Well, a bias is a set of beliefs or feelings or attitudes and behaviors, either in speech or action, that reflect stereotypes about the true nature and role of a person, what you really think they're all about. Cultural assumptions or preconceptions about or preferences toward people or groups of people. It is a predisposition or a preconceived opinion that prevents a person from impartially evaluating facts that have been presented for determination, a prejudice. And sometimes biases are not quite so open and obvious as we might expect. In fact, there's a thing called an implicit bias. I found this video from Van Jones that relates some fairly recent events, and I thought it would be helpful.
This week, more than 8,000 Starbucks stores actually closed up shop so that employees could take racial bias training after 2 black men were arrested at a Philadelphia store for actually no good reason at all. And that was one of several incidents of bias that have been caught on tape just recently. At Yale, my alma mater, a white graduate student called the cops to report a black woman napping in a dorm common area. Turns out the black woman was also a student who had fallen asleep after a long night of studying. In Rialto, California, a woman called the police on a group of 3 black friends who were checking out of their Airbnb. The woman told the cops she thought the group was suspicious because they didn't wave at her. So then in Oakland, a woman called police on a black family because they were barbecuing in the park and were using the wrong grill. So, look, there is no question this is a troubling trend, but sadly, these types of interactions are not new. We just live in a day and age where everybody's got a camera phone and they can record this type of stuff. So, does that mean, though, that all these white people calling the cops on minorities are a bunch of intentionally hateful bigots? Well, maybe some of them are, but most likely, not all of them. I think something else is at play here. Implicit bias. What is implicit bias? I studied it. Take a look. If I say you have implicit bias, please don't take offense, because everybody has implicit bias. We're talking subconscious perceptions of the world around you. If I say peanut butter, you don't think ketchup. Ew. Nope, you automatically think jelly. Yay. And the same with salt and pepper, green eggs and ham.
Do you like green eggs and ham?
All of these associations are shaped by everything from your upbringing and experiences to images in the media. Watching TV and film characters based on racial and ethnic stereotypes helps shape our instant associations about people. And those unconscious judgments that start off early and build up over time can have real consequences on everything from your success in getting a job, your interactions with the police, your ability to find housing. Now, let's talk about 2 professions that everybody agrees are full of well-intentioned people, doctors and teachers. Studies find that doctors are about half as likely to prescribe pain medication to black patients versus white patients with the same reported level of pain. Studies show unconscious stereotypes may be causing doctors to just underestimate the level of pain felt by their black patients. Now, black students are 3 times more likely to be suspended or expelled than their white peers. Consider this. Yale researchers asked teachers to watch videos of kids in a classroom and identify any problematic behavior. Each video featured a black girl and boy and a white girl and boy. The catch? There was no bad behavior in any video. And yet, 42% of teachers identified the black boy as the child who was the most challenging. Researchers found that teachers' eye movements actually followed the black boys in the video the most closely. Another study finds that having a stereotypically black-sounding name makes people imagine someone bigger and more violent. So, that's the bad news. And look, to be sure, there are some people who are still just flat-out old-fashioned racists. You know, they don't like people of color, and they want to exclude us or cause us harm. But even if you don't fall into that category, please don't be so quick to exonerate yourself, because it turns out that racial bias functions kind of like malware, like a computer virus in our brain that kind of causes a subtle glitch whenever the input is a dark-skinned face. So you may not be racist, but your brain probably is. And the first step is admitting that all of us may have picked up a bad virus or two along the way. And we can do something about that. Look, I'm Van Jones. This is The Van Jones Show. Thank you for watching. Peace and love for one another.
So a lot of this has to do with how we perceive people in a thing called stereotypes. So what is a stereotype? Well, a stereotype is a printing term from the 18th century that describes a process by which type was set and used in letterpresses, newspaper, and other high-speed runs. As a matter of fact, working in a print shop that my dad had in the backyard of our house in Waco, Texas. And I ran a press that looked just like this. It's called a Kluge letter press. Now the way we would set up our type to do a press run in that Kluge letter press is we would take individual pieces of type, each letter, each piece of punctuation, each space was a separate item of type, and we would arrange them in what was called a composing stick. And then once we got the type looking exactly like we wanted, we would lock it into a frame that was called a type chase. Well now, in order to keep that type from shifting through the process of a run, cover the type with a paper mache mat, and once that had dried, then we would melt lead and pour it into that mat to create a single sheet of lead that looked exactly like the type. That's what a stereotype is, where one item looks exactly like another because it was made from exactly the same mold. So a stereotype plate is a lot stronger and more durable under a press run than a composed page of type, and that's the reason printers use it. We'll talk a little more about stereotypes later, but let's talk about the fact that your brain is essentially a filing system. Everything you see or hear or otherwise experience gets filed away in your brain for later use. This is the thing called mental schemas. And we're going to do a little exercise to see how it works. I'm going to flash some words on the screen for a brief period, and I just want you to take them in for now, and don't do anything except notice the words. Now let's talk a little more about stereotypes. I came across a video by Dr. Kira Hudson Banks that I thought did a really good job of describing what stereotypes are and how they work in our mental processes.
Stereotypes are mental shortcuts that we take that help us quickly understand a group or make assumptions about a group. And it's important to be aware of them because sometimes they're wrong. Many times they're wrong. The problem with stereotypes is once we have them, we have a tendency to psychologically confirm our stereotypes. So we have what we call a confirmatory bias. We see information that fits our stereotype, and information that doesn't fit our stereotype, we just throw away. There's also different types of stereotypes. There can be stereotypes of omissions and then stereotypes of distortion. So sometimes we create stereotypes about groups because they're just simply not even in the picture. So we have to come up with the story. That often happens to American Indians. Sometimes the stereotypes are created because caricatures or distorted images of people are portrayed. That happens a lot and has historically occurred with African Americans. The hypersexualization of black women, the over-aggressiveness or assumption of violence of black men. So it's important to see our stereotypes and those shortcuts we take so that we can question them and be aware of how they might trap our thinking about other groups. Another thing, sometimes people say, oh, well, that's a good stereotype. But any stereotype that limits our understanding or ability to see somebody in their full humanity is not good. Stereotypes, when applied generally without thinking and checking them out, are problematic, whether the content is good or bad.
So now let's talk about our memories. You know, a few minutes ago, I showed some words flashed up on a screen. Now I want you to test your own recall of those words. I'm going to flash up another series of words on the screen, and what I want you to do is simply keep track of how many of those words you saw in the previous list. So, here's the question. How many words did you see in the previous list that I now just showed you in this second list? Well, the answer is 4. So why do you think some people thought they saw more words than they actually did see? Many times people will say, I saw 5 or 6 or 8 of them. Well, the only 4 words you actually saw in both lists were the words seed, bench, glass, and pillow. And the reason for that is the way our brains categorize information. For example, you might have seen the word chair and thought, well, I saw that word before. But you really didn't see the word chair before. You saw bench. And a bench and a chair are both things that we sit on. So when you saw words that included things like pew and bench and seat and chair, you just kind of lumped them all together in your minds. You didn't see the word glass, but you did see words like pane and window that would have suggested something made of glass. So that's the way our brains work. The clusters of words that we originally showed are associated with each other in our memories, like couch, stool, seat, pew, and bench. Well, those kind of go together as things you sit on. And so we kind of lump them together and file them away in our memories along with similar concepts like chair. They form a network of concepts or schema. And we associate these concepts with each other to the extent that the presence of some of the concepts suggests the others. That's the way our brains categorize, store, and recall information. So remember how you made categories out of those words? Then you associated other words and concepts under those categories? Well, when we associate like things into groups, we also tend to attribute value or emotion, whether positive or negative, to those groups. Whether those things are colors, insects, flowers, people, whatever. The brain does this in order to conserve energy and maximize efficiency. I mean, imagine having to reinvent the wheel every time you had a new experience. So, social cognition tells us that it's normal for us to categorize people and have a preference for people based on group identity. That's a normal, fundamental process of the human brain. And in some ways, this is a natural defense mechanism because our ability to categorize our experience is an indispensable cognitive device for understanding, negotiating, and constructing our social world. I mean, let's say you're walking in the park and you see a snake. Assuming you're not a snake expert, you don't have time to think, is this a lethal snake or is it a harmless snake? If the last snake you saw was a venomous snake in the movie Snakes on a Plane, you're going to get out of there quickly. There are things that our brain identifies very quickly. The three things the brain identifies within a fraction of a second when you see a person are race, age, and sex. And as we categorize these things in our brains, we encode information about groups of people, traits of those people into our memories, along with favorable or unfavorable impressions or values. It might be helpful to think of schematic memory as a kind of a middle shortcut. Remember the word recognition exercise? Sky, stool, chair, and so on? Our mental processes are similar. We kind of put things together in order to save energy and save effort. But the content of what we process may differ from one person to another. These mental constructs are called schemas. Now, the way that works with people is this. We are by nature prone to prefer most strongly people in the social categories to which we ourselves belong. Those are called in-groups, as opposed to people who belong to other groups that we don't belong to. For example, we might think of some in-groups that all of us belong to. Attorneys, people with law degrees, college graduates. Those are some examples. But there are also some examples of out-groups, people that we don't belong to in their group. The homeless, appellate justices, law enforcement. We also tend to perceive persons in our own groups with a greater degree of particularity. In other words, we recognize things that make them unique individuals. But we tend to view out-group members as all being alike, homogeneous, or all the same. Citing back to the snake in the park, one snake might see another snake and know it's not venomous, but people just see a snake. And if I, for example, were asked to identify or describe a person that I saw, and I could see that that person was from Asian descent, well, I might just simply say that person's Asian American. But a person from, let's say, China might be able to spot that this person is Japanese American or Chinese American or North Korean or South Korean or any of a number of other Asian groups. Stereotypes are much like heat-seeking missiles in search of confirming information. I found another good video by the Khan Academy on stereotype, stereotype threat, and self-fulfilling prophecy.
Okay, so what do you think about people who wear glasses? I think people who wear glasses look incredibly intelligent. In fact, I think just wearing a pair of glasses can add 10 points to your IQ. What about people who live in cities? I find people who live in cities to be abrasive, to be rude, to be terribly impolite. What am I doing by making these comments? Well, what I'm doing is I am stereotyping. And what stereotyping means is that I'm attributing a certain thought, a certain cognition to a group of individuals. I'm overgeneralizing. And stereotyping doesn't just involve a pair of glasses, what people wear or where they live, but it can also involve race, gender, culture, religion, even shoe size. So it can be pretty all-encompassing. Doesn't stereotyping have some disadvantages? Yeah, and it should be somewhat obvious. A major disadvantage is that it's pretty inaccurate. On the other hand, does stereotyping have an advantage? The answer is yes. Stereotyping actually allows us to rapidly assess large amounts of social information. So in that regard, it's actually a useful tool, even though it does have its drawbacks. What I want to do now is to talk to you about a different concept, and this is Again, perhaps a negative characteristic of stereotyping, and this is the concept of stereotype threat. Let's take two groups of students. One, the red students, and two, the blue students. And these students are two equally capable group of students. And now, let's make them sit an exam. How do they score? How do they test? Well, in this situation, their scores are equal. They're the same. Both red and blue get the same score. Now let's do something else. Let's make them sit the exam, but this time let's expose the students to some negative stereotypes about the blue students not being good at exams, not being academic. Well, what happens now? Well, the red students score the same, but this time we notice the blue students take a hit in their performance. Their performance drops. Well, this is what we see as being the stereotype threat. This is when the exposure to a negative stereotype surrounding a task can actually cause a decrease in the performance of an individual when attempting that task. So here, the stereotype actually threatens performance. Now, since I've been talking about city folk, city dwellers being so rude, let's put that down here. So when we put that down here, what are we really thinking about? So this is a thought process or cognition. And what we've said before is when we think about cognitions, we're actually stereotyping. So if I think city dwellers are rude, then I may say that, you know what? I don't like them. And you know what? If I don't like a group of people, I'm probably not going to spend a lot of time with them. I'm going to probably avoid them. Well, let's have a look at these two other statements. I don't like them. I'm attaching an affect, which is an emotion that can be positive or negative, to these city dwellers. So now there is an affective component to this. And when we have an affective component, we move from stereotyping to prejudice. And then, moving from the affective component, we start to avoid them. What happens there? When we avoid them, we are actually demonstrating a behavioral component. And when we demonstrate a behavioral component, we're actually moving from prejudice to discrimination. So as we can see here, the difference between stereotyping, prejudice, and discrimination is one of cognition, affect, and behavior. Well, let's go back to these city dwellers. If I avoid them, what do you think is gonna happen then? Well, you know what? Let's take their viewpoint. If I avoid them, maybe they're gonna start thinking that I am rude. So notice that may become their cognition now. And then if they think I am rude, they might not like me. And if they don't like me, they may try to avoid me. And if they avoid me, then I may start to think that they're rude. This actually feeds back here. This positively feeds back on itself. And suddenly we have this circle that can continuously feed back on itself. And notice that they have done the same things that I did to them. A cognition in that they think I am rude, an affective component in that they may start to not like me, and a behavioral component in which they start to avoid me. Well, what are we actually seeing here? Well, what we're seeing is a development of a self-fulfilling prophecy. And that's to say that our initial thought or cognition, that city dwellers are rude, becomes more true and more affirmed over time, either directly or indirectly because of our own actions. To us, our initial stereotype that city dwellers are rude becomes more true as we perceive them to be ruder and ruder over time in response to our own behavior. This is the positive feedback that we see in a self-fulfilling prophecy.
I hope this has given you something to think about. I know it has me. But thank you for participating and thank you for your service as Miners Counsel.